So today I am delighted to welcome back Professor Eddie Obeng to the show. Now, Eddie is a force of nature. He's been described by the Financial Times as a leading revolutionary and an agent provocateur. He's a professor of the School of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Henley Business School and co-founder of and learning director at Pentacle, the virtual business school. And he is a leading business theorist, innovator, and educator. He's an author of over 10 books and writes on a wide range of topics, from adapting to change, leadership, innovation, and organisation. And his writing and teaching concepts have been incorporated into 40% of the FTSE 100, or FT 100, should I say. He's a pioneer of digital transformation, design thinking, organisational agility, and he provides a no-nonsense overview on how traditional rules of doing business no longer apply, while they're offering guidance on how to do it better, really. So, Eddie, welcome back to the show. For those who don't know you, and those who haven't heard you on the show before, do you want to tell us a little bit more background about you and how you got to where you're doing now?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Nigel's done a great job of sort of doing a little thumbnail sketch. I basically do 3 or 4 things. I work out what's not working, especially in things like project area, but in other topics. I then figure out what to do to make them work. I write about it and I speak about it and I teach about it. And then I've organized so that I can help people put it into practice by using digital technology, virtual reality, so they can actually make it happen. So that's basically me. I'm a very simple person.
Brilliant. So we spoke on LinkedIn. It was only a couple of days ago, wasn't it? Really, probably last week, and we kind of turned around this interview quite quickly this time. I seem to recall last time when we had you on the show, we had a lot of twos and fro's, and but we did manage to get it quite quickly. So we're getting more efficient as time goes on, I'm sure. And
Yes.
you mentioned that you are going through with an update to one of your best-selling book, All Change.
Yeah. Yes.
And you've got a new edition coming out.
Yeah.
And as it's described here, is how to do successful change for people who aren't professional project or program managers, which is most of the people out there. And I think we are aimed at project management from a podcast point of view. There are people I know who aren't project managers but are interested in that, who listen to the show. And I think it is an interesting one. In fact, I was interviewed a lady called Anara Azbeklova. I've probably said her name wrong again. Who wrote a book called A Little PM Book, which we were chatting the other day, and I always struck me that project management is a life skill. Since I've been doing project management, and it's a little bit like geometry. No one realizes they're using geometry until someone tries to teach them geometry. And I think project management is a little bit like that. No one realizes some of the life skills we use to break down pieces of work to make change happen in our own lives are using similar skills to project management, but then applying that in the professional domain or in the business domain or in societal domain makes it much bigger. And in some ways it becomes harder to do something quite simple.
Yes.
And that's a long sort of thing to pitch there to you, really. Is that why did you write All Change? Why did you write it for people who aren't project managers? And why do you need to do an update now? Surely you wrote the right thing. Did you do it wrong the first time?
Yeah, maybe. Yes. No, actually, it's quite funny because it's for both people who are experts in project management but want to be better, and for people who are not project managers. It's both ends of the spectrum. The people I've sort of ignored are the ones in the middle, if that's not too mean. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Maybe I did get it wrong. But really, the book is for both ends of the spectrum. It's for people who actually don't see projects as a thing and don't have the skills and the professionalism, but also the professionals who want to be much better. It's just not aimed at the group in the middle. It's aimed at the people who are good project managers, professional project managers, got all the basic skills, and then they want that little bit extra. So that's what I've tried to do with the book. And when I explain the structure, that'll make a lot more sense. The first book, which I have here, which I wrote about 30 years ago. I have to explain how that one came about. So a lot of people who are listening to you are probably project managers, and they won't know that their careers turn on something which they probably never heard of, which is the Sunday when Margaret Thatcher was ejected from office. So what happened was I was at Ashridge and I was just doing my normal work and stuff, and I got a chance to write an article for the Sunday Times. And I wrote an article which said something like, project managers can show you the way. You know, whoever you are, you need a project manager, blah, blah, blah. You can use it in your business, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. CEOs are not using projects because they don't know what it is. So it was just a piece which, in those days, 30-odd years ago, was unusual. And it was on the back of the Sunday Times. But that was the weekend when Margaret Thatcher got ejected. And in the olden days, before we had social media, people wouldn't listen to news all week. Then on Sundays, they'd read all the news. And because the Prime Minister was being booted out, everyone on the planet, not just in the UK, read that book. And suddenly, project management became a thing. And if you're sort of my age, you'll sort of know there's like a hockey stick. And people like Martin Barnes and Mike Smith and people that we always used to joke about the hockey stick, where suddenly project management, because before that, if you were an executive and you were naughty, then they would put you into special projects. And that was like the end of your career. Yeah. So that happened. Project management took off. The course I was running at Ashridge became very popular. I realized that I needed to start to structure it so people could see what to do. And at the time, I'd already been sort of publishing stuff on non-traditional projects. So 30, 40 years ago, most projects, people would say a waterfall. I call them paint by numbers, like the little books where you have the numbers in. You do the blues and the reds, and it's a dolphin. Follow process. And the process is quite strict. People would say a project is something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I went and talked to people, and I realized that not all the projects, even before we'd rolled it out outside construction and so on, and IT and so on, were beginning, middle, and end. And I'd spotted that some projects actually were quite unclear, like organizational structural changes and things like that. And they didn't seem to have this format. And I'd come up with this really very simple sort of 2x2 grid, where I'll interview people and I say, how easy is it to define the goals? And they say, yes, it is. No, it isn't. And how easy is it to know what you're supposed to be doing? So they go, yes, it is. No, it isn't. So it's a what on one axis and a how on the other. And what I realized was there were two polar ends. One end was the paint by numbers, the waterfall, where you knew what you're doing, how you're going to do it, beginning, middle, and end. Other end was the first project I tripped over, that one was something called SWIFT. It was the interbank system for moving money around the world. They had this idea. They didn't really understand it. They didn't have any of the mechanisms. And it was quite unclear what to do step to step to step. I nicknamed those foggy projects. And then I had like names for the other two, but we'll park that for now. And I went to a conference in Trondheim and I presented this model of mine saying not all projects are the same. And I finished my presentation and somebody stood up at the back and they said, Dr. Obeng is deluded. he's got no idea at all about projects. He's a complete idiot. Projects must be clear, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so I was standing at the front, completely sort of shell-shocked and slightly embarrassed because I just delivered this thing in this auditorium with like 500, 600 people in front of me. And the first comment I got back as a question was an insult. And then someone else in the audience said, no, you're wrong. Dr. Obeng is correct. Some projects are hard to define. And then there was this bun fight of insults amongst the audience where they were hurling insults backwards and forwards. And I just sat back on the table with my legs crossed for about 5 minutes watching this. And then finally the chairman stopped it. So I knew I was onto something. I knew people were interested in projects. I knew we had to find new ways of communicating projects. And so that's why I wrote the first book.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? It's because, as you say, it was 30 years ago when you wrote that. And when we look now at the VUCA, sort of over the last 5 or 6 years, VUCA has been a term that I'd never heard of until, actually, it was the PMI 50-year anniversary synergy event in 2019, where the term VUCA was the first time I'd heard of it. And actually, that timing was quite good there because the level of volatility and that we got through COVID era and then actually the level of ambiguity that we've got now with the speed of AI and that change is just so dramatic now. And I saw
Right.
something the other day, which was, I can't remember what it was, but the exact stats, but it was something like someone who'd lived, say, from 1800 up to like 1970, 1890s to 1970,
Yeah.
the amount of change that they saw in those like 80 years.
Yes.
But at the current pace, we're seeing that as a society in something like 2 years
Yes.
in the amount of change. And that's why it's not a surprise that there's that overload from a lot of us, and the fact that we're having to deal in everyday life with that change. You know,
Yes.
the
Yes.
old change thing where you're going through disbelief, anger, all those sort of things. We seem to be going through that every couple of your latest social media tool that you like using goes bankrupt, gets bought by some lunatic,
Correct.
and you don't like it anymore. And or it just stops being used and gets turned off, or gets something. I got very animated about some of the tooling I use for doing the podcast the other day because it's perfect for me. It works lovely. I like it, and they're going to change it completely, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
And and that ambiguity, that fogginess of projects has got more
Correct.
over my experience. It was when I've started coming up 20 years, 25, 30 years ago, project management, it was all about that paint by numbers
Yes.
approach. Yeah,
Correct.
you knew what you were doing. And I still think some people think there is always, quite often there's let's summarize it at paint by numbers level, but underneath it, there's this sea of fog
Yes, there is.
that no one is quite sure what it is, but they're telling someone at that exact level, yeah, it's
Correct.
this.
I say, I mean, we'll explore how to deal with that because often there isn't enough language being used to deal with what people want. Because if it's paint by numbers, then you need to be structured and organized and have your plans. If it's fog, you take one step at a time and have trust and hold on to people's hands. They're not the same. So the methods you use for the two different types of change are completely different. And if you haven't understood that, you get it wrong and then you fail. But going back to the
Yeah.
VUCA thing, VUCA is really it really intrigues me because it's a rebranding of. So the first idea about the fact the world might be changing a lot was put out there, in my view, by a chap called Ellie Goldratt, probably late 80s-ish, 1980s-ish. And he was looking at the manufacturing industry, which had just imploded in America. And he realized that there was something broken because a manufacturing company would be doing not very well. Then they'd go in, try to rescue it, reduce the number of products, focus on the profitable products. Things would get more complex. And then what would effectively happen is they would go bust. And he couldn't articulate it properly. And he described it as the throughput world versus I forgot what the other, cost world. The cost world mindset was, it's structured, let's just deal with the bits and everything. And his argument was, everything's changing, everything's moving. And Ellie Goldratt was sort of my mentor when I was at Ashridge. I learned a lot from him. I went on his programs and stuff. And after that, I produced and published something called the New World Management Approach. So I've got a TED talk. So if anyone's interested, it's only 12 minutes. Go and watch that because it will explain. But what I explained was that we had to recognize that there were a number of things going on. For example, if you looked at the pace of change over a 20-year period, it would quite happily be accelerating upwards. Which way should I do it? Is that the right way? Okay. So this is the past and that's the future. Is that the right way for you? Or should I do it that way? I'll do it that way.
I don't know. The thing is, they rotate these things rotate people the different way to what they are anyway. So you never know.
Okay. Let me do it across my chest. Okay. So the pace of change is going like that, increasing. Number of people on the planet, same curve. Use of technology, Moore's law, same curve. Volatility in markets, especially commodity markets, same curve. So I published with a number of my colleagues at Ashridge that, look, this is what's happening to the change, the volatility, and so on. But when we look at our client organizations and we ask them how they're responding, what we discovered is they're still using annual budgeting cycles. They're still using 3 monthly, quarterly cycles. The decision meetings are every month. And you can't do stuff which your boss won't let you do. So for them, the pace of learning is quite flat. So the world's changing like this. The pace of learning is quite flat. So I hypothesized that a time would come where the pace of change was up here and our ability to learn was down here. And at that point, you'd suddenly find your life was a mess, because having been used to being able to learn fast and the world was changing, you could see what was coming. You could define your projects. You knew that your software would be there for 20 years. You could get spare parts for your car, etc. All of a sudden, somebody would be talking about a topic and you would never even heard that word before. We won't be able to make sense of it. But the structures we built for what I call the old world would also fail us, because the old world is built on the assumption that the boss knows more than the subordinates, knows more than the next lot, and that knowledge flows like that. But when you hit your new world, which is changing, chances the boss knows about what AI is zero. So the decision making is broken, the information flow is broken, and as it accelerates, you hit another problem. You and I are talking, and I'm probably talking, I talk quite fast, so I don't know, 100 words per minute, 120, 200 words per minute. Okay. So if you're in a meeting, that's how fast information can flow from one person to another. But of course, if you're on the internet, or if you're on a network, a digital network, hundreds of thousands of megabits per second. So the information flowing around outside the organization is far faster than you can get it into the organization, up the structures, into the people who make the decisions, for them to learn and make the right decisions and pass them all down. So most organizations are actually, we can call it autopilot, but actually they're not functioning. And the way we saw that was suddenly the executives stopped trying to run their own businesses and started buying and acquiring others and merging them, because they didn't know what to do internally. So all of that's part of the same thing. The stat about the amount of data is always a bit suspect, because in the past, if you ask somebody, what's that plant? They go, it's hedgefoot. They say, what's that bird? That's a tweet bird, etc. What's the weather going to be like tomorrow? They'd look up, they'd look at the stars, they'd work it out, and they go, it's going to be sunny. So they knew different things. They absorbed different data. We are now quite disconnected from nature. Nature is quite complex. It's data rich. If you don't believe me, go for a walk in the forest and count the leaves. Okay?
Yeah.
And so we keep trying to compare our lives, which are actually quite data poor and disconnected from nature, from people in the past. The thing which makes our lives bad is we have a smaller set of things, but they're out of control and they impact all the elements of our lives. Sorry, I've gone off piste from talking about projects. You did ask.
But it's interesting, though, is that, like I said, projects is a life skill.
Yes, it
And
is.
life drives projects and projects drive life.
Yes, exactly.
Literally, do you know what I mean? It's kind of, I've got, we talked earlier, I'm making guitars, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm essentially doing the same thing as I'm delivering a project when I'm doing one of those things. So I'm breaking it down into component parts. I've got some instructions on how to do it. Some bits of it I don't know how to do.
Yeah.
And because it's the style and the look of it and what I feel like, and the bits I'm using are generally what I'm trying to do are pieces of discarded stuff in my shed in my garage. So again, it's a voyage of discovery whether one bolt works as a bridge or doesn't, and is it too high, is it too low, and that fogginess is there.
Yes,
just in that
exactly.
little, and even now I've got version 2 and 3 of those
Correct.
coming out. As I know, I had to buy a new hammer because I need to hammer something specifically.
Exactly.
And that's new edition of each of those will happen.
Exactly. And so as the world accelerates, sorry, go on, finish.
No, you carry on, yeah.
As the world accelerates, there's more change. And it's always important to remember that change is not the same as improvement. Improvement is a subset of change. So when change happens, some of it's improvement, some of it is challenges, i.e. your work life's getting better, and some of it's opportunity. And so you go, what change should I do to match that opportunity, challenge, or improvement? So that's what the project is. The project is the chunk of change you do to match what you see in your mind. That's basically what a project is. And those chunks, some of them are like paint by numbers. I've built this guitar before. I did it out of the same bits, to fog. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to make a guitar out of a bit of soap. How do I do that? Where do I start? Etc. Don't know what, don't know how. So there's that. I'd left out the other two. Those are projects where you know what, but you haven't got a clue how you're going to do it. And then the ones where you've bought the technology, bought the thing, you've got the how, but you're not sure what will come out. That's AI. AI is classic, what I would call a movie project. A movie, you have the camera, you don't have the script, you film something, it's always rubbish. You need the script. The other type, I call them quests, because it's like King Arthur and the quest for the Holy Grail. Let's get the Holy Grail. Where is it? I don't know. Let's go looking everywhere. So those are the other two. But AI, for example, is touted as it's going to change our lives. It probably will. It might not. But at the moment, it's a movie. It's a solution looking for a problem with millions and billions behind it. So it's desperately looking for a problem. And it will solve a problem whether there was a problem there or not.
The internet did that a little bit, didn't it?
So I say?
The internet did that a little bit. When it was used as that communication device. Correct. It was quite useful. It was quite a tool. It was kind of, and what the computer did as well. Yeah. It's kind of the people who were looking at the time, that was only a few people who are going to need it. That
Correct.
Famous quote from the guy from IBM. Was it? You might need one in every office or whatever. But that vision changes, that use changes. And like you said, AI at the moment, the internet's done it. Right?
Correct.
Fine. Who would have thought sitting watching people's cats rolling around on the floor would be something of interest and amusement to people? AI is the same thing. In 2019, I did my book there, which was about how to just my little potted things of things I've done to help my day go quicker and easier, and using a few bit of automation, a little bit of decision making stuff and things like that. That was 2019. I can't remember when I released it now, but anyway, whenever 2021, so whatever, it was before that. I think it was within 6 months, certainly 12 months. Suddenly, ChatGPT-3's there. Suddenly, that AI, as you say, it was from that day forward, it was hockey stick, and it wasn't even I didn't even use the word artificial intelligence when describing some of the automation I did, which it's just the level of artificial intelligence. But that automation, using Outlook automation and a few other things, and I've done some other things with automating stuff on a phone. But the scale that changed is massive on one, its capability, but then use cases that are coming out that I'm seeing there that I just sit there and I never even thought of that as a use case. Exactly. And I saw something the other day. I used one where I loaded up my project management song into it, and it generated a video for me, and it needed tweaking. But actually, for the base content, it listened to the words, it kind of put the timing, and it grabbed the video of this going on, and stitched it together. And I'm like, as a base thing, you could go right. I'm trying to think of an idea. You do that. You created your little movie. In this instance, you go to a professional and say, "You want something like that? Go and make it for me." And you've done mock-ups, and I see a lot of people using it for mocking up, same as 3D printing, using that sort of thing, taking off the same as AI.
So rolling back a little bit. So the thing about AI, which people don't realize, is it's really, really old. When I was doing engineering, we were programming neural networks. Okay, neural network. So artificial intelligence, the name fools people because they think artificial means it's not quite intelligent, but it's an artifice because a neuron is sort of shaped like my hand. There's the little bits which are getting them incoming messages, the nucleus over here, and then it fires the message down, and then your toes move, or whatever it is, okay? So a neural network's very much the same. Put data in here, do some sums, decide where's the right answer. If it's the right answer, good. If it's not, come back to it again. And it basically builds a 4x4 matrix. So when you put data in here, it says, okay, hand, draw this. Music, do that picture, whatever it is. So that's what it's doing. There's no algorithm in there. The reason it's become popular, of course, is because the gamers were using chips which are not general CPUs. They're using specialized graphics chips which do the calculations really fast. And so that's why it's become a thing, because the hardware became cheap. So people will play with it. But the reality is it's not intelligence. Because it does things like use words, we anthropomorphize it. So we think it's smarter than it is. I always say to people, if you're going to take any AI seriously, ask about something you don't know anything about, be suitably impressed, then ask about something where you're the world expert and see what that looks like. and you'll discover it doesn't know anything. It's an averaging, it's an interpolation machine. It's not going to create anything new. It's just inside that thing. You will have to do all the creative work. So unfortunately, if you're not a creative person, you'll think that doing the mock-ups is helping you, but you'll just choose the wrong mock-up because you're not a creative person. So there's a lot of I'm being too negative, but there's a lot of stuff to be done. And in terms of delivering projects, it's really crucial because people want to use it in project management. They're very excited about it, but they're missing the actual fundamentals of delivering projects. So what I wrote in the first book was 2 parts. When I started realizing there were different types of projects, the other thing I realized was that when you're running a project, all the non-human bits stay the same overnight, and all the human being bits can do anything. People can change their minds. They can have a second conversation. So I realized that soft stuff was going to be very important. And then I did something called a bubble diagram. And I realized that to make a project work, there were like 5 things you had to get your head around. One was this type of project thing. Is it for or paint by numbers? The second was people related. Who are these people? What do they want? How am I going to influence them? What am I going to do with them? The third was people related. I'm leading this bunch of people. Why wouldn't they do what I asked them to do? My team is rubbish, etc., etc. Then the fourth was about people again, but it's about learning and review. Are they telling me the truth? Are we finding out what's going on? And it was only the 5th one, which was mechanical, which is planning, coordination, risk management, so on. So most of the elements were either the situation you found yourself in or people-ish. Okay? And so that's what I wrote the book about. And the way I tried to get that across was I wrote the first half of the book as a story, and the hardback copy sort of looked like this because they didn't have that idea. More importantly, because my persuasion skills were rubbish. So the softback version, which came out immediately, I was able to bully them because the hardback version went to #1. So then I became important. So I could say, well, I want it this way. So this side is all change. It's a story. And when you start from that side, the front cover says all change and it tells you a story. Then you flip the book over and it says the project leader's secret handbook. And this bit is that me explaining those 5 different areas and what you do about them. How do you do it? And so I managed to get that. So that's basically what the first book was about. It was trying to get people to realize that when they're running their projects, a lot of the training we have in things like the body of knowledge and so on is great stuff, but it's not the human-y stuff. Now, since the book came out, people have realized that human beings are important. We even talk about the neuroscience of projects and stuff. But often these topics are bolted onto the projects. They're not integral into the project. So that's one element. So I've rewritten it to try and explain how these things fit a bit better, because people have heard about things, but they won't know where they use them in the project. What does it mean when I have a meeting, etc. So I've tried to build that in. The other thing I've done is I've added, sorry?
Yeah, I've seen that. I'm just thinking there you get.
You recognize it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I recognize it. Yeah.
So it's really important because they can spout all the words, oh, that one's raising my cortisol, whatever it is, okay? And then they don't know what to do on a day-to-day basis. Or they'll know the theory. I've got to be empathetic. And then they don't know how to do it, So
yes. I'll do an empathy course and get a certificate. I'll tell everyone that I've got the certificate, therefore I am empathetic.
Yeah, and the performance of projects, you have to put in context. When I was a young man, 1/4 of projects failed. Thank goodness they failed, we're rid of them. Half of projects were VAM projects, which suck the living blood out of you, or poltergeist projects, which hang around smelling bad, spooking everyone, never going away, never getting delivered. And 1/4 of them were supposed to be successful, and those people lied, okay? It hasn't changed very much in 30 years, despite us professionalizing everything. And that's because we are not integrating the learning and the behaviors and the emotions and the thinking into the project leader to make the person perform. So I added 2 extra bits to the book. The first part is a little bit intriguing, at least to me, because I had a client called Simon Cooper, and he came to me one day and said, Eddie, we'd like all our projects to be perfect. So I laughed. Of course I did. It's ridiculous. So I laughed. And so he said, no, I mean it. So I laughed again. Perfect projects. Don't be silly. Okay. And I know why I laughed, because when you say perfect projects, immediately in your mind, there's a project where everything goes perfectly. So it's like, those Rube Goldberg machines where they line up like a chicken on a tennis ball, and then a little card and a marble, and one knocks the other, and then finally go bang and whatever. Okay, that's what comes into your mind. Don't be silly. We can't line it up all up according to the plan and press a button and make it happen. But that thinking is wrong. It's dumb. It's incorrect. In the same way as we thought projects had to have a beginning, middle, and end, and then we realized, as you said, with the pace of change, we've got the foggy ones, we've got the questy ones, we've got the movie ones. Oh, and they move around. Yesterday, I thought I knew what and how I was doing. Somebody's just changed the rules. HMRC have changed the laws. Oh, and the fog. Oh, no, but we know what we're going to do. So now we're on a quest and we're all trying different things. Oh, but now we've lost the quest. So all that was happening. So in the same way as that's happened, perfect projects have to be approached differently. And I realized there were cultural aspects. Ask me if what I'm saying doesn't make sense. But I interviewed some of Simon's people and I discovered something. I discovered that, imagine you're a project leader and you run a project and it goes really well. Everything works. Guess what? It means you never meet any senior people. So what's going to happen to your career, okay? Imagine you're on a project and it goes sort of well, and just as it was going off track each time, you announce to your program director, whoever it is, it's going off track, and then you have another meeting and you put up your plans for your red, amber, greens and stuff, and they go, yeah, you're really trying to fix it. Your career is like a rocket, isn't it? So it's not in anybody's interest to make their project look easy. So you could end up, and you do reward people who run bad projects more than we reward people who run good projects. Because there's no metric to show what the contribution of the actual project manager is. And so the culture games it and rewards the heroes. So one of the things I did was I said, well, can we imagine what would happen? Do you remember the plane which, there was a plane which landed on the Hudson River in New York?
Okay. It's in the movie, isn't it?
Same mindset. Imagine you've got a project and then suddenly you've got project manager less. So now it's just the project is just running on its own. What's going to happen? So what I did was, and this is in the book, we sit around as a group in advance and we go, right, this project we're going to run, great. Is it foggy? Yeah, we all think it's foggy. There are some other dimensions I explain in the book, which I won't go into much detail, but I'll just explain one part of it, which is visibility. When you're working on your guitars and you want to see how it's going, you pick them up and have a look at them. If you've got somebody writing software for you or you're doing a culture change, you have no idea where they are. You just have to rely on them because that project is invisible. So we look at the project and go, it's foggy. Yeah, it's foggy. It's also invisible. Oh my goodness, it's invisible and foggy. Great. So what's going to happen? Well, when we try and put the plan together, we won't be able to get a business case. And then the senior people will pretend they're not supporting, but they won't because they don't want their names on it. And then we'll start, and then people will pretend they're working on it, but they're billing to other hours, to other projects. So we work out all the things which are going to go wrong with the project. And then we go, well, if any of those things go wrong, that's the project leader's fault because we know they're going to go wrong. So the only things they can bring to attention are things which are not on the glide path. Because anything on the glide path which is going wrong, we've also already figured out how we're going to fix it. Okay, so we're going to get the senior people, we're going to sign up in blood, wherever. So when you start talking about perfect projects, it's partly cultural. And then there are some other aspects of it as well. Like, what does the project leader know? They're all professionals now. They've all passed their degrees, their courses, and they've got a little tick. But then you forget everything. So when you're in the heat of the battle, you need to have the skills. So how do you get the skills? Well, if we know the 5 areas which I described, and you can do like a personal health check or a project health check, it can say to you, Nigel, I like your guitar project, but you got to work on your stakeholders. Not any part of the stakeholders, but stakeholder agreement. And this is how you do stakeholder agreement. You make a statement, you look in their eyes, and if they smile, you know they're not telling you the truth. And if they frown and think about it for a while, then you know you're on the same page. You repeat back to them what they said, sign in blood, done. So a health check de-risks the project because it provides exactly the skills that people need exactly when they want them. You with me? That's how you get towards a perfect project. So just having given you those 2 elements, the model I use in my mind for thinking about perfect projects is not the Rube Goldberg things falling over. There's a really weird sport called curling. Have you come across it? Basically, it's on ice, and people have this stone, and it's like a team, and they discuss this, who's going to do what, and then they get the stone, and one person rolls the stone. But it's not like bowling. Bowling, you just throw the thing and you potluck. They roll the stone, and they slide on the ice with the stone they're pushing until they know it's right in the right place, then they let it go. So now it's heading towards the target, but they don't leave it be. Two of the team members get these brushes, they look like brooms, and they go whish, 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 to melt the ice, to get the puck, to go, the stone to go left or right, so it'll get to the target. So the project is sort of launched gradually, and then they're ahead of it, like with the just-in-time learning, like with the glide path, guiding it towards its goal. So those concepts are so alien to project management, traditional project management. They're in the book because I needed to try and explain them to people. And the reason they're alien is because the entire project management thing has been based on trying to make people accountable. Because we started off with beginning, middle, and end and paint by numbers. So we assume that we know where we're going. So we try and drive the projects basically through reviews. We have a meeting, we go, what happened last month? And we spend half the meeting talking about the review. It's like you're driving your car and you're going, okay, we'll look through the windscreen. We sort of know where we're going. Now we're just going to look at the rear view mirror and the side mirrors to get where we're... That's what we do. So the idea of getting ahead of yourself is not in the project culture at all. The culture, as I said, will reward heroes. And often it's too much on the hard, tasky side and toolsy side, and not enough on the human bit. So I've written that in there. So I don't know, what's your reaction to that? Because I've sort of thrown lots of stuff at you.
No, it's really interesting because that human side of it, the metric side of it, the mechanical side of it, sorry, that you mentioned there, the non-human. That's the thing that I kind of, and I've said this at different times, where I kind of think that trying to think how to word it really. There's lots of teaching out there, fantastic teaching on how to do those mechanics, and AI is going to come in and deal with some of that.
Yes,
as we move forward. Then that creative element of the project management skill is that soft skill, as it's described, or the power skills, as they are described in other places. In the fact that, and I've never thought about it before in that context of we teach it at this level instead of in that mechanical stuff, as you were talking there. And now I've seen it going, okay, so we've got to bring people up. We've got to improve people's understanding of this soft factor, of this piece, of this human thing. But actually, it's not. Applying it is the hard part, not knowing it. And so we do the knowing, not the application of it.
Correct.
And as you say, I see that as right. Okay, so as part of risk management, how are we going to be doing that? Okay, so how is that human factor of risk management in there? How's the human factor of planning in there? Of empathy, of understanding, of getting, and we have to just do it, and we don't proceduralize it.
Correct.
And so then,
So, I mean, what I've done, as I said, I do technology as well. So I built something called Cube. Why? I wanted to be able to teach people at a distance so I could teach them continuously, because what you're describing is exactly the problem. They learn, they have to apply it on an ongoing basis. They have to apply it with their colleagues. Often they're distributed from their colleagues. So I thought, how do I bring the essence of a human being, their spirit, their joy, their laughter, and their learning and their understanding to work collaboratively with other people? You've got to use technology. You've got to use virtual reality. There's nothing else which will work, okay? So I built this thing called Cube, and it's VR, but without headsets, because headsets are stupid and they make people throw up, so forget that, okay? So having built this campus, what I then did was figure out what culture you needed for people to work together and do what you were describing, which is talk to each other, build. And then myself and the tutors, we work with the project manager on their real life project, and they apply things and they bring their colleagues in and they try out the behaviors as live, but virtually as an avatar. So they can do it in real life, or they can do it as an avatar, or they could bring their colleagues in and work with them as avatars. So all those are all equally possible. The thing is that because they are allowed to practice without the pressure, and because the health check has told them precisely what they need to learn, it's easier for them. But also we have on Cube simulations. So you can come in and for 3 days, we can give you like 10 years worth of project management experience as an avatar. Because you come in with your colleagues and it gives you a scenario. It goes, right, so I don't know, the key supplier has just gone bust. And your manager is blaming you. What do you do? And then you have to act it out or answer the question. And so suddenly all that stuff about my power skills and my boss is giving me a hard time. How do I negotiate? So we then give people these things. We call them people engagement tools, possibility exploration tools. We call them PETs. And the PET will be a very precise thing which says something like, when you're negotiating with your boss, you probably want to use extreme matching. That's one of the PETs, extreme matching. So your boss says, I'm concerned about this supplier. And normally people will go, I've got it under control. No. Extreme matching says, you're concerned. You think you're worried. I'm more concerned than you because I could lose my career. I'm even more worried. I'm trying to think what to do. At that point, your boss has nothing to say. Because if you've extreme matched them, what are they going to say? You say, I'm more worried than you. Now they're going to say, no, you're not. Yes, you are. So now they have to follow you. So you've now taken a leadership position. So that PET teaches you how to deal with situations like that. And you can do it on the simulation and you can do it in real life. And we have tons of these PETs. And they're, again, in the book with QR codes to guide you to quick guides and things like that. So I built that part in as well. And in the book, I talk about working on Cube. So I try and explain to people how fast you can learn when you're not having to do the sort of walking around for coffee stuff. How fast introverts can learn because they can participate and the extroverts aren't bullying them all the time. You know, how fast you learn when you have to do the thing straight after you've been taught it within a 15-minute cycle rather than come on a 1-hour webinar and then use it in 2 weeks' time.
It's interesting. I did some training a few years ago, project senior leadership, project management training, and the key to that was the role playing elements.
Yes,
and they call it role playing, and it was very much taught you how as a manager, as you're going in there with the client and some of the client skills as well around the fact that you don't know. The meeting you're going to may not be the meeting that is going to end up being, and that was one of the things I learned was that you walk in there and being prepared to go to the meeting that your client wants you with or your manager wants you to have with you, rather than the one that you had written down with your agenda, which actually. If you just say, but I wanted to talk to this agenda, and this is what we're going to talk about, you know, and the building that flexibility, but it's really hard. And I've had instances of that where that's one of the things that sat in the back of my head. I've been in meetings going, what the is going on?
Yes.
And then thought, okay, calm down, Nigel, breathe. Okay, so you're not doing the meeting, you're not in the meeting that you plan to do.
Sure.
Okay, so what I wanted to cover, I can pick up in another meeting. I can arrange another session. Right. This is what's important to this person in front of me now. It can be the same when you're dealing with your team, with your family. You know what I mean? You can be there with you're sitting down to have dinner with the family, and suddenly there's something really important that he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And you kind of deal with it, don't you? Exactly. And it's funny how we can do that in those scenarios. Sometimes it's easier and harder at work. You sit there going, I've written down my agenda.
Yes.
I'm a project manager. I must control everything.
Yes, exactly.
And those flexibilities in change within change, because your project can get sideswiped by something unreasonable, but every single interaction from an email to a document, I've seen situations where the email where it's just gone a completely different direction to where you thought it would go. Yeah. And you've got to be ready to do that. You've got to practice that because it's hard to exchange.
The reason you fall in love with what you planned is biological. Because the way we're designed is when your brain thinks about something, because it burns so much energy, you have a mechanism which makes you try and turn it into more food. That's why you love all your own ideas. It's an emotional connection with your own ideas to encourage you to go and get the food. Use that idea to get more food. So it's a biological thing, and you'd have built connections in your synapse. You don't want to start killing your nerve cells, so you fight quite hard. So often what we'll do is we'll teach people, and we'll teach them about that emotional feeling of ownership. But then we say, when you're starting with a meeting as a project leader, you don't take the agenda from last week. You don't use the minutes. You start with, there's one of our tools, one of our pets called hopes and fears. You literally go in, bit chit chat, and you go, right. So what's the biggest thing hope people have got around here? And the client immediately announces something you weren't expecting. And you feel that feeling in your brain. Because you're going through a process, you capture all the other ones. Then you go, well, what shouldn't we waste time on? And they tell you about those. And then you make sure you deal with the ones which are their fears first, because no one pays attention if they think some things are going to go south, are they? So you deal with those, you agree on what you're going to do. Then you can start work. And by the fact you have a process for taking on board the surprises, your brain doesn't get all captured by your crocodile brain, which is basically what have your amygdala hijacked. You don't get that because you're in the process. And then we teach them some very simple techniques. One of my techniques is called playback. And playback is a pet which just says, let the client talk. And if you're not listening, you can't do this playback, because playback basically says, so let me just be sure what you're saying, Nigel. You were saying that you've been in meetings and where really things have come at you from many different angles. And even before the meeting, sometimes the email has already stressed you out and you wanted to go in there with your own goals, but you know you've got the capability of doing it because you can do it at home. So if we can find a way to get people to change, would that be the right answer? Have I understood what you were saying, Nigel? That's playback. I've just gone through a number of steps, and the steps are what we teach them. That's what's on the pet. And so once they've done that, the person relaxes because they know they're being listened to. So this energy level goes down. And also, you can only do that if you are paying attention. So it puts you into that alpha wave position where you have to actually pay attention to the world instead of just coming at it with what you think you know already. So I built those things. So those are all built into the book so people can start to really change their way of behaving and working. And I've set it up so that they can do it from the book, but also we've got cubicles on Cube they can rent for 3 months, where they can meet tutors or they can run their own projects. And you've got the whiteboards which take them through the tools in a specific order. And so there's that going on as well. But the fourth part of the book, should I tell you about that bit? I got fed up with people saying to me, we're going to do digital transformation. We're going to do AI transformation. We're going to transform our business. They use the words change and transform as if they're the same thing. So change is alterations, improvement is in there, projects we've already understood. Transformation is different from change. So you know what a butterfly is? Butterfly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And caterpillar. Okay, great. You know what caterpillar is. Okay. So imagine that you were a butterfly and you wanted to learn how to fly. Would it be useful to go to a caterpillar for flying instructions? No, they have no clue. Caterpillar world, they wander around, eat leaves, get fat. So in their world, change is moving from one leaf to another, getting fat, splitting their sides. That's what change is. But to become a butterfly is different. The metrics for a caterpillar are how many legs can you walk, etc. The metrics for a butterfly are can you fly, can you eat nectar? There's something which happens in the middle, which is the scaffolding, which is the cocoon. So you have to dissolve most of the caterpillar bits, then do some magic in the cocoon, and then discover what the butterfly does. If you think you're doing transformation and you can define what the butterfly is supposed to do, you are not doing transformation. And I got so fed up with people telling me we're trying to transform our organization digitally, these are our objectives, that I went, I've got to write about this, because that's why they're failing at 80% rates, because you cannot fully define the end point in a transformation. That's the whole point. And it's different from change, and it requires different things. And it's got 3 stages, and you treat the caterpillar different from the cocoon, different from the butterfly, and you have to make sure the caterpillar stays alive. So what are the key things? What are the key behaviors? It's quite complex, and that's why people fail. So I've written that bit about transformation also into the book. So yeah.
Really?
So anyway,
that's
transformation is all change, because it's all change.
So it's all change, and transformation is change with a little c, not a big C. And I find that it does irritate me, the use of the words transformation.
Yes.
uh, in different things, because I kind of go, meh, what does that mean? And
Yeah,
digital transformation
exactly.
then really bugs me,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's, we've been doing digital implementations for many years, and that thing of, and I heard someone describe it that if you're doing transformation, if you're doing change, you can go back to what you were doing before if you
Yes.
wanted. If you do transformation, there's no way back,
No,
because
there is.
essentially, if you're doing it right,
Correct.
how many legs does a butterfly have? How many legs does a caterpillar have?
Correct.
Different.
You got rid of all the legs.
You're finishing
Exactly.
things off, aren't you? And then you're adding other things, and you're changing,
Correct.
and it's kind of and that's it has to be that
Yes.
um, big. And then you see people say they're doing transformations, and there are still emails as part of their approval process before it gets keyed onto a new computer system. So
Yeah.
here's our digital system, and we've got an email approval system before John can tell Louise to put that on there.
Yeah.
Um, and then it goes through the same people who just approved the email before, and boils my blood
Yeah,
when I
but they
see.
don't. They don't mean to get it wrong because they don't understand. Because again, we have a very strong project-based professionalism, and we have a sort of a goodish program director-based sort of thoughts. Change management is more on the soft side, so you get lots of HRE coachy types who sort of understand the peoply changey bit, but they don't always necessarily connect it to the doing stuff. And then transformation, they're really, it's just a black hole. There's no obvious place to turn to, and so that's why I've written about it in the book. And I've tried to do it again. I've got people can hire Cube, qub.cc, and they can buy 3 months worth, and then they can spend their time with us, just being guided. And they can bring 10 colleagues in, so it's collaborative. That's the whole idea. Or they can bring 2,500 or 20,000 people. It just costs them money there. So it's really about trying to make sure that the learning comes at the point people are trying to apply it. It's the right learning. So we have to understand what makes an ordinary project not fail, which are those 5 things. Then we have to understand the things we have to put around that project to give it a chance of being perfect. And then we have to understand if the project is not just a project, if, as you said, it's transformation, so it's just beyond change, then what do you do? And I try to do that so that they can experience all 3 different areas.
Brilliant. Eddie, I've kept you on longer than I promised I would. I apologise for that. I could talk to you all night about these things, and I'm sure you'd want to talk about it as well. Your passion comes through,
Yeah.
and I think, I suppose, is there anything that you would like to have covered but haven't covered? And if people want to find out more, get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing so?
Yeah, there's tons of stuff. I mean, because I, as you know, I'm very active in the project management space, but I'm also active in innovation and leadership and strategy. Because I've learned quite quickly that if you just focus on one area, you don't understand the complexity of what's going on. I mean, the world at the moment is quite a tough place to be in. So to help people in their day-to-day jobs, in their day-to-day lives, with their kids, be able to manage small chunks of change, whether it's a wedding or whether it's moving house or whatever, that I think matters. And I've tried to put these tools in so people can extract them and use them. So I think I would love to talk about bigger change, because if you ask me, I can redesign how we govern ourselves, because it's obviously not working. So those are the sort of topics, but not for this particular podcast. So eddieobeng.com is my personal website, so you can find out about the book there. But if you want to find out about Cube, it's qube.cc, and that's Cube, and that's where the virtual stuff is. The school is Pentacle, the virtual business school, so it's pentaclethevbs.com, and that's where you'll find out about our courses and things like that. And watch that TED talk, because it will really set the context for the VUCA, and it will help you see what's going on. Because I really produced that TED talk to try and help people realize that the world had moved on. In fact, I think I say something along the lines of, most of us are reacting rationally to a world we recognize and understand, but that no longer exists. I think that's, I say that somewhere in there, which makes people go, what? I go, yeah, everything you know is already obsolete, but you think it's still there, so you're still doing the same things. It doesn't work that way anymore. Great. Thank you very much for having me on, Nigel.
It's an absolute pleasure as always, Eddie.
Brilliant. Thank
You're
you.
you're a spark of life as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much.
You have a fantastic rest of your evening, and we'll catch up again soon, I'm sure.
Brilliant. And
Thanks
good luck
again.
with the guitars.